September 17, 2024, Lebanon. Across the country, pagers buzz simultaneously. The ringtone is unique, one not found in the standard selection of tones. It's a sound reserved for one thing only. Hezbollah leaders scattered throughout Lebanon and Syria pull out their devices. The LCD screen displays a simple yet ominous message. You have received an encrypted message. Press to decrypt. Seconds later, the most successful intelligence operation of the modern era is set into motion. May 2015, United Arab Emirates. The man is as inconspicuous as they come, balding, slightly overweight, and dressed in a Western-style suit. He could pass as any ordinary neighbor in an Arab household. Someone unremarkable, someone easily overlooked. But the Mossad agents watching him through their binoculars know better. His attire, his mannerisms, none of it fools them. They aren't just observing a man, they are tracking a target. This man is one of several arms dealers Hezbollah regularly uses to secure weapons and other supplies for the terror group. Today's deal is a conventional one and legal under any jurisdiction in the world, save for the fact that he is supplying a globally recognized terror group. But the man entering the secret Mossad warehouse on the busy docks is only here to inspect a shipment of ordinary walkie-talkies, or at least that's what he thinks. Inside the warehouse, the man greets the seller, an East German businessman dealing in imported electronics from China and the Pacific Southeast. On the surface, it's a routine transaction. The businessman resells his goods abroad, and today he's moving a batch of walkie-talkies. But what he doesn't know is that he is an unwitting pawn in a Mossad operation years in the making. As the buyer inspects the devices, every word, every movement is being silently observed. Hidden cameras planted the night before capture everything. The high-definition feed captures the Hezbollah arms dealer picking a walkie-talkie from a nearby crate, turning it over in his hands. His brow furrows as he tests its weight. It's heavier than he expected. The seller gestures to the device. It's ruggedized, built for the field, military grade. The dealer turns the pager on, works with the various buttons. Satisfied, he places it back into the crate alongside hundreds of other walkie-talkies. The two men shake their hands, sealing the deal, and papers are signed. By the end of the week, the walkie-talkies will be on their way to Lebanon. Watching through the remote cameras, the Mossad surveillance technician exhales, tension easing just slightly. The walkie-talkies aren't as durable as advertised, at least not this batch. Their batteries won't last as long either. Some of the internal ruggedization meant to protect the electronic components had to be stripped away, making room for something far more important: several grams of high explosives, carefully concealed at the top of each battery. But the buyer didn't seem to notice, and nobody else will notice either, as the walkie-talkies remain in use by Hezbollah for nearly 10 years. Several grams of explosives ready to be set off with a single signal that will take a decade to arrive. Unknown date, 2022, Israel. Many in Mossad, Israel's premier intelligence agency, preferred the old motto to the new one: "By way of deception you shall wage war." Proverbs 24:6. Despite the updated motto, Agent X is amongst those who prefer the old one. The meeting is quick. Normally, he'd brief a supervisor who would run the idea up the chain, but given the extreme sensitivity of what's been proposed, Agent X is heading straight to the director. The conversation is direct, the concept even simpler, especially for Agent X. He doesn't need much explanation. After all, he was there for the walkie-talkie plot of 2015. The truth is, the idea had been floating around for a while. Hezbollah had accepted the booby-trapped walkie-talkies with alarming ease, proving how effective the method could be. The real concern wasn't execution, it was exposure. A single compromised device could unravel the entire operation, tipping Hezbollah off to a second, nearly identical plot waiting in the wings. Plus, there was little need for immediate action, and ultimately that's what Agent X's proposal is all about. Hezbollah, ever cautious of Mossad and its Western allies' electronic warfare capabilities, continued using the pagers well into the 21st century. It was hard to blame them. Pagers were primitive by design, making them nearly impervious to hacking or remote hijacking. By relying on coded messages, Hezbollah could issue orders to thousands of leaders simultaneously, and while Mossad or any other intelligence agency could intercept the signals, they were powerless to decode or disrupt them. So Agent X wanted to target the pagers directly, not for eavesdropping. That plot would be too easily discovered. The plan was to booby-trap them, in exactly the same manner his team had come up with the booby-trapped walkie-talkies 7 years ago. The director was suspicious. Walkie-talkies were easier to trap. Given their already significant weight, adding enough explosives to harm or kill wouldn't be difficult. But Hezbollah used modern pagers, which, despite being an obsolete technology, made full use of miniaturization to keep them comfortably small and sleek. Getting enough explosives to be lethal or harmful into the small pagers would be difficult. More difficult than hijacking a shipment of pagers for delivery. The plan has promise, but there's skepticism. Agent X is given a few weeks and a team to test the practicality of his new plot. Date unknown, 2022, weeks later, Israel. The pager plot, as it's come to be known internally, has several critical problems to overcome. The first challenge is inserting the booby-trapped pagers into Hezbollah's supply chain. Fortunately, there's a solution, leveraging a supplier Hezbollah already trusts. Gold Apollo, a Taiwan-based manufacturer outsourcing through a Bulgarian company, had long been a reliable source. Mossad agents infiltrated the company's network, uncovering the identity of the last seller Hezbollah purchased from. To their satisfaction, she already had an established relationship with the Hezbollah buyer, having supplied him with multiple shipments in the past. She never knew who the pagers were going to, Hezbollah using a system of shell companies to obfuscate its financial trail. But Mossad can also play that game, and play it much better. The sales lady is contacted via a Mossad shell company and offered a lucrative contract to sell pagers to the same Hezbollah buyer again. With the trust of the buyer secured, the pager plot moves one step closer to possibility. The second challenge is lethality. The pager plot has a single objective: kill or maim the user while leaving bystanders unharmed. The explosives must be powerful enough to eliminate their target, but not so strong they take innocent lives along with them. Wives, children, and unsuspecting bystanders couldn't become collateral damage. No matter how effective the operation, Mossad's victory would be meaningless if it sparked international outrage over civilian casualties. For weeks, some of Mossad's top explosives experts have been cooking in the lab. The lab refers to an underground experimental chamber where different compositions and amounts of explosives are tested on dummies. The dummies have the same physical properties as the human body, and they use fake flesh and bones, which helps measure the effect of the explosives. An ideal charge weight is determined, but there's a problem. No pager currently used by Hezbollah is large enough to house the added explosives without raising suspicion. The solution is a prototype nearly 50% larger than the standard model. It's a gamble. Mossad's director pushes the pager on his desk away in disgust. The sabotaged pager is so bulky that it doesn't make any sense for Hezbollah to want to buy it and replace their old pagers. Agent X defends the pager. They can sell it as having extra features that no other pager has. They can make it water and dirt-proof, rugged to withstand the rigors of military life. But the director is unconvinced. It'll take a full 2 weeks to convince him to give the supersized pagers a try. The plot moves forward. Late 2022, Hungary. In a well-appointed neighborhood in the heart of Hungary, a nondescript office operates in quiet anonymity. Rented months ago under the name of a shell company, it appears to be just another electronics importer. But the few employees inside aren't salesmen, they are Mossad agents. This is just one of several identical offices scattered across multiple countries, each a front, each with a single target. It'll take time to convince Hezbollah to switch pagers. To that end, Mossad has bought hundreds of thousands of dollars in digital ads running on popular social media sites, even on YouTube. The ads all advertise the Gold Apollo pager designed by Mossad. To downplay the size, the ads feature a pretty Western-looking girl dunking the pager into a cup of water. Next, she buries it in the dirt and removes it to show it's still operational. The pager is shown being dropped on the ground to show its ruggedness. The ad campaign is indistinguishable from any other online promotion. Slick, energetic, and expertly crafted to blend in. Just another product in a sea of thousands. Mossad ensures the ads flood Lebanon and the surrounding region, saturating screens with carefully placed offers. Weeks pass, clicks come and go, and then a bite. Actually, they have many. Legitimate buyers call and email the import businesses requesting the new pager. Mossad has to discourage them by quoting a very high price so as to not raise suspicion. However, by the time that Hezbollah's buyer comes on the line, they're ready to make a deal. But it can't be too good of a deal or else the buyer might get suspicious. And after a few rounds of negotiation, a deal is reached. Hezbollah agrees to pay the Israeli shell company for over 5,000 booby-trapped pagers. Mossad isn't just deceiving Hezbollah, they have to keep Gold Apollo in the dark as well. The company manufactures the oversized pagers, raising an eyebrow at the unusual design. But any suspicion fades when they're assured the added bulk is for extra protection. Shock-absorbent padding, they're told. As shipments quietly move from Mossad-controlled warehouses into Lebanon, neither Hezbollah nor Gold Apollo suspect a thing. Unknown date, 2024, Israel. As expected, Hezbollah operatives inspected the pagers for any possible tampering. The small explosive charge, however, is actually inside and part of the battery itself, and it goes undetected. They receive complaints about the bulkiness of the new pagers, but they're accepted regardless by thousands of different links in Hezbollah's chain of command. From squad leaders to top commanders, even advisors to Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah himself, the pagers spread through the ranks. One by one, they are distributed, embedding themselves deep within Hezbollah's chain of command. With a single press of a button, Israel now holds the power to sever that chain in an instant. A tactical position so precise, so devastating it may go down as one of the most strategic operations in military history. And that is ultimately the goal of the pager plot. This isn't just about simply sowing chaos and creating casualties the way the walkie-talkie plot was. This was about specifically targeting Hezbollah's large chain of command at every single level. The terror group operates its own army, one big enough to challenge the official Lebanon military, which instead leaves it well enough alone. With thousands of rockets and missiles, many hidden inside of homes, and over 100,000 combatants, Hezbollah represents the biggest military threat against Israel in the region. Iran might present a missile threat, but with a nation between them, there is little possibility of a full-blown war. Hezbollah, however, operates just miles from Israeli cities, and it's a critical threat to a nation that has historically suffered one massive weakness: size. Unlike other nations, Israel is so narrow that an enemy attack could easily reach deep into civilian areas. It's said Israel is only ever one failed battle away from extinction. Such was certainly the case during its historical wars against its neighbors, and why Israel has been so aggressive about creating buffers between itself and other hostile nations. At any moment, Mossad could detonate the pagers with a single signal, and sow chaos across Hezbollah. But that was never the point of the pager plot. The ultimate goal was to break Hezbollah's chain of command right when it was needed the most, on the eve of war. In the chaos that ensued, Israel's air and ground forces working in coordination would destroy the first echelon of Hezbollah forces along the border, and the agency would not be capable of responding. It was an information age blitzkrieg. With no war on the horizon, the pager plot was insurance. But that was all about to change. November 2023, Israel-Lebanon border. A fresh wave of rockets streaked across the night sky, soaring over the heads of the IDF soldiers stationed along the Lebanese border. They burned high and bright, harmless to the troops below, but not to the civilians in the city beyond. Hezbollah's rocket attacks began almost immediately after Israel launched strikes on Gaza in response to the October 7th terror attack. And despite the relentless barrage, Israel had held back, resisting the urge to retaliate. Escalation was a risk the IDF couldn't afford, not yet. Hezbollah lacked heavy equipment and cutting-edge technology, but they had something just as dangerous: 100,000 armed fighters poised to surge across the border. If war erupted, Israel's defenses would be stretched to their limits. At first, Israel endured. Warnings were issued, ultimatums delivered. But when the rockets kept coming, the response shifted. IDF airstrikes began hammering Hezbollah launch sites. Yet Hezbollah had a countermeasure of its own: human shields. As the airstrikes intensified, so did the unintended toll. The civilian death count began to climb. Hezbollah fighters had been organizing, and Mossad intelligence sources deep inside of Lebanon warned that the group was gearing up for a fight. A great deal of the instigation was coming from Iranian influence agents, however, freely embedded within Hezbollah, who operate largely under the influence of Iran. The nation's network of terrorists, known as the Resistance, stretched across the Middle East into Africa, and right now it was fighting to make Syria its own. That would be a regional disaster that would launch the entire Middle East into a war that would drag in the rest of the world. As the situation in Gaza spiraled, Iran ramped up pressure on Hezbollah to attack. They needed it to happen. Hamas was doomed, bottled up inside Gaza with no escape. A second front from Lebanon was the only way to split the IDF's focus and give Hamas a chance at survival. Without it, Hamas would fall, leaving Israel free to turn its full force on Hezbollah, a danger for Iran's regional influence. Hamas was more of a militant ally, and it was Iran's tool to keep Israel under constant attack and inflame the Middle East. Every IDF retaliation was fuel for outrage, a means to derail normalization efforts with Israel. Iran's goal was nothing short of reverting history back to before the Six-Day War, when the entire Middle East was united against Israel. But in this new world order, with ever more former foes normalizing relations and building economic and industrial partnerships, Iran's influence was ever weakening. And so it pushed for an attack from the north. But so far, Hezbollah's senior leaders were defying Tehran. For Mossad, the pager plot became a daily discussion. Every morning, the director and his senior-most men would be briefed on the situation in Lebanon. If there was any sign of a serious mobilization, they'd have rushed the pager plot into action. But that would only work if the IDF was ready and capable of immediately exploiting the confusion with air and ground attacks. Without the two working side by side, the initiative would be lost. And the IDF was definitely not ready for a two-pronged campaign. September 17, 2024, Lebanon. Mossad had left nothing to chance. The composition of the pager itself was taken into account when deciding on how many grams of explosive to use. It needed to be powerful enough to kill or maim the user, but not so powerful it caused serious injuries to anyone nearby. The design department had even conducted a study on what ringtone would sound the most urgent. They hired focus groups in completely different countries and tested out a variety of tones, deciding on a fast, shrill, double beeping tone as the most likely for the users to respond to. If a pager detonated inside a pocket, the blast would rip through their flesh, sending the victim straight to the hospital, requiring immediate surgery and a long, agonizing recovery. This was often even better than killing. It drained the resources of the enemy and taxed their capabilities as they handled thousands of wounded. In fact, the pagers were designed for this exact purpose: crippling, not killing. Aside from developing the most alarming tone possible, Mossad had also conducted tests to figure out the average time for a user to respond to a pager. This too had been conducted overseas, using focus groups and field tests. They discovered that on average a person would take 7 seconds to respond to their pager. So they set the explosive to explode shortly after that. They were leaving as little as possible to chance. At 3:30 p.m., the signal was sent. Within seconds, over 5,000 pagers across Lebanon and Syria erupted in a frantic, unfamiliar beep. Users instinctively reached for them, puzzled by the sudden alert. The sound was new, something they weren't accustomed to. On their screens, a simple message appeared. "You have received an encrypted message. Press to decrypt." The LCD screen indicated 2 buttons that should be pressed simultaneously. This was not a random message. This message had been specifically chosen to ensure as many people as possible were looking at and holding the pager before it exploded. Whether the user pressed the buttons or not, the result was the same. The pagers exploded in unison, unleashing thousands of pocket-sized blasts across Lebanon. Many had been holding them, eyes locked on the screen. The sudden eruptions tore through their fingers, sent shrapnel slicing into their faces, and turned quiet rooms into scenes of chaos. Missing fingers and eyes would be the injury of the day, but not the only ones. For those too busy to check their pagers, the explosion came without warning. Motorbike riders felt a sudden searing pain at their waist as the blast tore through flesh, shredding down to the bone. Their speeding bikes veered wildly, sending them crashing into traffic, their injuries made even worse by the inevitable collisions. Across Lebanon, security and home cameras captured in horror, in real time, pager explosions erupting in rapid succession. Deep inside Hezbollah's command bunker, 2 men dropped to the floor, seriously injured by the sudden explosion. The culprit was unmistakable. Mossad had just shown its intelligence superiority over Hezbollah, but accomplished far more than that. The attack had come in the wake of a massive uptick in cross-border attacks, with news that pressure within Hezbollah was building up to a major attack. Instead, IDF forces surged across the border where they had warned civilians to flee months ago. Hezbollah defenders put up a brief resistance, but with their command network shattered by the pager explosions, organizing a defense was proving impossible. September 18, 2024. Hospitals across Lebanon had been swarmed with patients from the pager attacks. As planned, deaths were few. 42 people in total were thought to have been killed. Lebanese authorities claimed there were 12 civilians, but as usual, a lack of access by independent reporters made accurate figures impossible. What was a fact was the success of the pager plot. Later, a Hezbollah official would confirm that the group had lost 1,500 fighters from the attacks, with thousands more injured. The biggest blow, however, came at the chain of command that had effectively been severed. Senior leaders found themselves paralyzed. Orders couldn't reach individual units, and trust in anything electronic had crumbled. Laptops or cell phones were banned outright. Hezbollah was mostly using runners and landlines to communicate, significantly slowing down their ability to coordinate a response. But there was one more device still in wide use: hundreds of walkie-talkies purchased nearly a decade ago and serving faithfully up until now. At 5 p.m. local time, a second signal was broadcast into Lebanon. Once again, a wave of explosions rocked the country, hundreds of them scattered from Beirut to the southern front lines. Unlike the pagers, the walkie-talkies carried a far deadlier payload. Packed with significantly more explosives, they were worn clipped to gear, resting against the chest. When they detonated, they were instantly lethal. Anyone wearing one was killed on the spot. Shrapnel ripped outward, injuring those several meters away. At one funeral being held for 3 Hezbollah fighters, a child who died from the pager attacks, one of the dignitaries was carrying a booby-trapped walkie-talkie. The resulting explosion and the chaos caught on camera. The biggest impact, however, wasn't in the casualties. The second wave of explosions did something more than kill Hezbollah fighters and leaders. It made them scared. Suddenly, no device could be trusted. Everything from television remotes to air conditioning units became suspect. Even the weapons Hezbollah relied on became objects of fear. What if the Israelis had managed to sabotage the ammunition? It wasn't impossible. The United States had inserted thousands of rigged bullets into the supply chain of the North Vietnamese. The sabotaged rounds would explode when fired, ruining the rifle and causing a violent explosion of shrapnel flying back into the face of the soldier. The IDF made full use of the confusion. Unable to coordinate, their confidence completely shaken, Hezbollah fighters fled rather than face well-coordinated attacks by IDF forces. Raids and airstrikes made use of the confusion to kill enemy VIPs and caches of weapons. When the dust settled, the long-dreaded Israel-Hezbollah war never came. The United States had deployed 2 aircraft carriers, bracing for an escalation that never materialized. But in the end, it wasn't firepower that prevented the war, it was intelligence. With a single covert operation, codenamed Operation Grim Beeper, Mossad had delivered a 2-punch knockout blow, crippling Hezbollah's ability to resist before the fight even began. Hezbollah wasn't the only loser. Iran had suffered a devastating blow. With both Hamas and Hezbollah crippled, Tehran's grip on the region weakened. The fallout didn't stop there. Not long after, the Assad regime in Syria collapsed, further unraveling Iran's influence. The nightmare scenario, the regional war that could have pulled in every world power, never came to pass. What many had feared was inevitable had been undone before it even began. This operation was one of the most shocking and strategic takedowns in modern history. But what do you think? Was Operation Grim Beeper a masterstroke of intelligence, or does it raise ethical questions about warfare in the digital age? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Now go check out CIA vs. KGB, or click this other video instead.